Hello, Carl here. We're going to introduce ourselves to React, and we're going to use this code sandbox tool in order to do that. So let's create a new sandbox. We'll choose the React project, and it will nicely set up a React project for us. So we've got the running app on the right hand side, and it's React that's outputting that. But how is it doing that? Well, let's go to the HTML page that's being rendered and start to investigate and start to understand how the React stuff is being rendered. So if we go over to the folder structure and find the index.html, that's our root HTML page. That's what's being displayed. Let's inspect the page that's being rendered, and we can see that our h1 and h2 is in a div with a app class, and then that's in a root div as well. And if we go back to the HTML page, we can see that root div, but nothing's inside the root div. In our HTML page, React is rendering that app div and then the h1 and h2 inside it. So we're starting to understand how the React stuff is being injected into our HTML page. Let's just close those dev tools. It's time now to start looking at how React renders stuff to the DOM. So if we go into the source folder and index.js, we will see the root div referenced. So we get that root element, and we can see that we use it in the React DOM render method as that second parameter. But the first parameter looks a little bit funny. That doesn't look like valid JavaScript. In fact, it's a reference to a React component called app, and we can see that that is defined above in a function called app. And whilst the function signature looks usual and we've got a return statement, what's inside that return statement looks funny. That doesn't look like valid JavaScript. And in fact, it's something called JSX, which isn't valid JavaScript. It's something that transpiles to JavaScript. So we are going to have a look at JSX. We're going to hop over to a Babel REPL, which is available on babel.js.io, and that will help us understand what JSX is. So let's take a copy of our JSX in our app component. We'll paste it in the left-hand pane, and on the right-hand pane we can see what that transpiles to. And we can see that it transpiles to react.create element functions, and the first parameter in that create element function is the tag name, and the second element is an object literal containing all the attributes that are going to go on that tag, and then the third attribute is the child, which in this case is another call to React create element, and again we say it's a h1 tag. This time there are no attributes, so we pass null, and then the child is hello code sandbox, and then the h2 is another create element, no attributes again, we've got that text as the child. So it transpiles to combinations of React create element. Okay, so we're starting to see what JSX is, what's happening. It's compiling down to JavaScript, but what are the benefits? Because it just looks like HTML. Well, let's look at another example which is similar. It's using that same, or compiling down to that same create element function, but let us use a variable for the email, and let's try and substitute that variable into this HTML. Then all of a sudden it does become a little bit more powerful. So we're going to create an email variable using const, and we'll copy that. So we've got an email variable, and then let's try to inject it in to our HTML. and you can inject JavaScript into the HTML using curly brackets, and we can do the same in the attribute, but we're going to use a template literal because we're going to use interpolation, and so we can just put the email variable in there, and we just need the dollar to finish the interpolation off, and we can see that that compiles down nicely. So we're starting to see the power of JSX. We can mix JavaScript with HTML. Let's take things a little bit further now. Let's have an array of emails, and let's output those emails in an unordered list. So let's set up the array, and we'll have 2 items in our array. There we go. And we're going to create an unordered list, and we're going to map over, so we're going to start some JavaScript to map over the array of emails. So curly bracket to start the JavaScript. We're going to use the map function on the array, and then each email in that array is going to create a list item, and we can copy the anchor tag inside our list item, so we can start to see that it's quite powerful. So to resolve the compilation error, we need to remove that extra square bracket, and that allows our JSX to compile okay. Let's hop back to our Code Sandbox project. Now that we understand a little bit more about JSX, we can start to write some React code ourselves. So we can see we've got a app function component. That can be an arrow function. So let's quickly turn that into an arrow function. And let's now add something to our component. So we're going to add the current date after the h2 tag in our app component. So we're going to have a paragraph tag, and then we need to use some JavaScript. So we're going to open the curly braces, and we're going to use the date constructor, and then the toLocale date string to give us the current date. And there we see that we've got the current dates rendered beneath that h2 tag. We're going to move on to create our own React component. So we'll create a file in the source folder. We'll call that hello.js, and then first we need to import React, and then we can define our component. So this is going to be a function component called hello, taking in no parameters, and we're going to output a message in paragraph tags, and the message is going to be hello, welcome to React. We'll also need to export this function so that we can use it in a different file. If we save the file and hop back to our index.js, we can then import the hello component. We can then reference the hello component in our app component in its JSX. We can also create class components in React. So let's change this function component into a class component, and to do that we extend from the component class within React, and it is a method within the class called render which returns the JSX, and that's what's going to render the JSX. So we need to wrap a render method around that return statement that we had in the function, and that's our app component turned into a class component. Historically, class components have been more powerful. They've had more features than function components. That's not the case anymore since React 16.8. In terms of whether we should choose function components or class components, there is a trend towards function components, a little less code to type, easier to reuse the bits and pieces within a component as well. But class components have been around in their current form for a long time as well. So there's benefits either way. It's really down to you, which you choose. Probably just be consistent really. Whichever you choose, just consistently create and use that type of component. There's one final thing that we're going to look at, and that is we're going to create a React with Typescript project. So let's do that in Code Sandbox, and we can see it's pretty much the same. The only thing that we want to point out at the moment is that the extension, the file extension, is a little bit different. That was index.js in the JavaScript project. It's index.tsx in this project. And that allows the Babel compiler to get rid of all the TypeScript types. It knows it's a TSX file, TypeScript file, therefore it can remove those TypeScript types. And it's that Babel compiler that also transforms or transpiles that JSX into JavaScript. And that completes this introduction into React. Hope you enjoyed the video.